Okay, you have no idea how many times I have tried to record this podcast and it just has not worked out the way I wanted it to, and all the things I wanted to talk about for this. I literally had started a different podcast with a different topic, and I feel like I will still talk about that, but I think this week, through a conversation with a friend, I just kind of felt like this is what I feel a little bit more inspired about. So here we go. Today I'm going to be talking to you about your life expectations versus reality. Now, when I say this, it's such an interesting concept because when you are brand new baby, 5 years old, and you go to school and they ask you what you want to be when you grow up, you know, the kids always say an astronaut, a doctor, a pro basketball player. And I love it. And I think we should always have these aspirations because people do become these things. And then, you know, now with today's world, you know, being famous on whatever social media is a really high aspiration for kids today. And I think that wasn't really the culture that I grew up in as a kid. I can't imagine being in that culture as a kid right now. Yeah, I just can't imagine that. And I'm so thankful my childhood was strictly playing outside and playing with my siblings and my cousins growing up, and an hour of TV after I did my homework and we ate dinner. Like, that was the most technology I got. Oh, we also played an hour of video games after I got through 6th grade. We finally got a video console, a Sega or something. So, like, I didn't grow up with a lot of technology. We had a green screen computer. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. But what I'm saying is, we have such a wide scope of possibilities today of what we can do with our lives, with our God-given talents and abilities. And there's such a wide range of opportunities and possibilities. It's endless, really, of what we can do. And growing up, you know, we have this picture in our mind. Like, have you ever played the game MASH, right? And it's this game that little kids play, girls and boys, when they're in kindergarten, and you go through and you do this spiral. You know, you draw a spiral, you have someone close their eyes, then you do a spiral, or you do tally marks. I remember doing both. So if you do the spiral, you'll keep making a spiral from the inside outward. And then when the person says stop, you count how many, from the top to the bottom, how many lines there are. And then if you do tally marks, you do however many tally marks. But then you go through MASH. So you write out this whole thing of, like, your boyfriend, of who you're going to marry, and how old you're going to be, and how many kids you're going to have, and what house you're going to live in, if you're going to live in a mansion, or, you know, a sewer, or a house, or a shack, or whatever. And how many kids you're going to have, and who you're going to marry, and all this stuff. And so obviously you pick from all these options and you get to write them down. You give the answers of what you would like, and then you let the fate of when you said stop be the determining factor of what is going to be in your life. And obviously it's all grandeur ideas and thoughts and of what your life is going to look like, And for me, honestly, I had this picture in my mind as a little 5-year-old and of me being like this princess living. There's no way I couldn't live in a mansion. There's no way I wouldn't marry Prince Charming and live in a palace. And, my husband will play guitar and my husband will do this and we're going to have this kind of car and we're going to do this lifestyle and this is what we'll do for a living and, all these things. And I held on to this my entire life, people. My entire life. And honestly, I waited till I was 33 years old because I was waiting for a perfect scenario. I was waiting and waiting. Like, I'm not meeting anyone with this perfect person. I'm not meeting this perfect person that has all these situations and going on all perfect in their life. And my life isn't perfect already, but their life better be perfect so that when we meet, our life will be perfect and nothing will be wrong and there won't be any hard work or anything. La. And this was my dream life, but for me, it was as if it was already a reality. Because, at one point, the church taught me this, write a list down. It goes like this. Write a list down of, your perfect husband, and write a list of everything you want and don't settle for one thing not on your list. Sound familiar? ? Well, I was personally looking for Jesus in a husband. Absolutely perfect. And that doesn't exist except Jesus. So you can become a nun, bro, if you want. But no perfect person exists. For a reason. Because we are eventually to be married to Christ. So, and we are to sharpen each other, but to be married to Christ. And so, anyways, fast forward, so I held on, back up. I held on to this through high school and college and, when did I graduate college? At 23, 24? No, 26. Super. I studied abroad and did stuff, okay. No excuses need to be made, but I graduated college at 25 or 26, and I, not only to not, I would not meet my husband at 26, let's say, when I was in Spain, I was 23, when I went to Spain and studied abroad, I was 23, or something. I would not meet my husband for 10 years later. I would not have been able to fathom that. That would have broke me if the Lord told me I was going to meet my husband 10 years later after I went to college. That is crazy to me. But that was the plan. Because I wonder if you can hear my baby screaming in the background. He would like to be held, but Dada is there. Okay. So, I held on to that for a very long time. And only recently, when I met my husband, did I realize I was mistaken. Now, I'm not saying throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. You want an incredible person that loves the Lord and all these things, but you have to hear the Lord on who you're going to marry, number one. And number two, they ain't going to be perfect. So what is their messiness, is that worth living life together? And do your calls line up? I mean, that's a big one. But maybe your calls don't exactly line up. But maybe you didn't know your call in the first place. Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. Maybe your call was simply to love the Lord and to love the people in your life, and you thought it was something else. Maybe you had, along with your spouse, you had this grandeur mash idea that you were going to preach the gospel in all the nations and speak in stadiums, and maybe you will, because there are people that become that pro basketball player and that pro baseball player. And there are people that work for NASA or to become a doctor or a veterinarian. But sometimes we feel like what actually happens in our life, if it doesn't turn out to be one of those things I mentioned or other things, it becomes this lesser version, like a lesser valuable offering to the Lord. But that, sister, is completely off. You are way off base if that is what you believe. That if you feel like in order to be valued by God and to be valued by the people in your life, that you need to preach in stadiums and be a traveling speaker or be a pastor of a church or doing something in the church, even if you're a pastor, associate pastor, or a children's pastor. But if you are doing something like that, rather than being a garbage man, that makes you more holy, friend, you have religion. And I know this because I have felt this way. Number one, I didn't want to have kids or get married. I didn't want to do anything I didn't want to do anything except what I thought was the most holy of jobs, which to me was living a year in every single country as a missionary, single, potentially never getting married, and preaching the gospel and living amongst the people and just being holier than all the moms and all the things that women always do. In my mind, this was terrible at the time, was getting married, having kids, and doing nothing else for the rest of your life. Honestly, I'm being honest. I'm not proud of it, but I'm being honest. And I thought that I was going to live a much holier life if I did that and I never got married. And I in some regards, my husband will say, I always wanted to get married, and I did, but I felt like I was living this, I wanted this standard of a man, and like a perfect man, and nothing less than perfect. And if I couldn't have that, I was just going to live single forever and travel the world, and have no responsibilities, essentially. And so I lived pretty much this reality until 33 years old, and even up to the point of deciding if I was going to get married or not. That was something I wanted to choose or needed to choose, and I wrestled with that a lot. And it's funny because now, being married and having kids, a kid, and being a mom, it's more than I could have ever asked for. I never in a million years, in some ways I deep down wanted to be a mom because what I told you in the first part of the podcast, but there was something later on in life that became holier than thou, this religious thing where I felt like I would be doing more for God if I were to live a life solely onto God and focus on only Him and nothing else in life. And there are aspects to that if the Lord, calls you to that. But obviously, I wanted to have kids, and I just didn't want to get bogged down by getting married and having kids in the sense of not being able to do what I felt the Lord called me to do. I didn't want this mom life and wife life to get in the way of my calling, so to speak. And what a selfish thing in some ways. I want to do what in some ways you want to do that. If it's not the right person, obviously that would be terrible. But if it is the right person and you feel like, think about it, you want to do what you are called to do. Well, I guess it's a two-way street. Yes, if you are being called to something, there is that. And if you're not with the right person, obviously it would be better if you did your calling than be with this person. But if your call, maybe you didn't know your call, you know what I mean? This is kind of where I feel like my heart was. I didn't know if I really knew my call in the first place. And then when I met Caleb, we became best friends, and it was as if it was that I didn't want to do life without him. There was a point in our relationship when we were going to go our separate ways, and I just didn't want to do life without my best friend. And so that was, for me, along with the word from the Lord before that, because at first it was the Lord, but at the same time, it's like, you want to hear the Lord, and also in that first, is this the choice? Is this what you want? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to turn this into like a relationship thing, but it kind of goes along with what I'm saying. And When we got married, again, all of these weird expectations from Hollywood and from the Disney princesses we watched growing up, that your life is supposed to be perfect and that it won't ever be hard, that you're going to live happily ever after. And you do. But it does, in order to have that, number one, happiness is a choice in the mundane and in the everyday. And number two, it takes work. And I know people always say it takes work, but it really does take work. And I am by no means an expert. We haven't even finished our second year of marriage. So there's a lot that goes into making a marriage work. And I totally took this for granted from my parents and families around me, aunts, uncles, all this, because most of the families in my family have stayed together on one side of the family, and on the other side, none of them stayed together pretty much. So, except my parents and a couple other, I guess some on the other side, but more than not stayed together. Now, half of them stayed together, half not. But I think later on when I went to a Bible college, this ideology of that you were brought here, and this is true. What I'm about to say is true, but the mindset behind what I'm about to tell you is not true. And let me explain. So, what we were told is the best thing, or what was eluded, was that speaking in stadiums and becoming a preacher or a preacher's wife or preaching the gospel to all the nations and living in a country your whole life and all this was the most you could do for God and the highest calling. And if you are doing one of these things, you really are doing the most for God. And if you're not doing those things, well, you tried in life, but honestly, you're just going to look at the people that are preaching the gospel and are being the pastors in a mega church, and you are doing these great things for God, and you're going to wish you were doing that too, because you're not doing whatever your 9-to-5, your blue-collar job, your stay-at-home mom is never going to be as good as what so-and-so's doing because he's traveling the world or she's traveling the world preaching the gospel. So you see how this was all formed. And because I was meeting the perfect person, air quotes, Jesus, well, then I better just go live for Jesus, and do the most for him by doing XYZ, what I told you, running across the world and dedicating my life to the lost and the widows and the orphans. And that by doing this, I would be giving everything and devoting my life to the Lord. Now, thinking about reality versus this dream life. I began to like think more about this recently, and coming across a friend and a conversation that we had recently about, really thinking how this person kind of had a conversation, and they just kind of mentioned, I'm living, like, we were just kind of catching up, and they were just like, I'm just living this humble life for Jesus. I'm working my 9 to 5, an honest work, steady income, providing for my wife and my kid. And, I'm meeting people at the store. I wasn't trying to meet this person, but we did, and prayed for her and connected with her. And I just love when they said this. They said, I'm living a humble life before God. And honestly, I have been thinking about this a lot, because feeling like I'm not doing enough for God, that I'm not in some position to truly, what feels like, make a difference in a large amount of people's lives, and that got me thinking, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel like I'm not making a difference? Why do I feel like what I'm doing doesn't have purpose? Why do I feel like it's not enough? Why don't I just receive what Jesus did and love the people around me? But no, it has to be this grandeur thing, like I mentioned, because it's kind of transformed. And yes, I want, like everybody, there's this just temptation to want the nicest things and live in the nicest houses and blah, blah, blah. But that would require certain lines of work and potentially doing something great, but, what society considers. See, I'm constantly correcting myself in this, because I think this is something that needs to be thought about deeply in our lives, and not just once, but over and over again. It needs to be well thought out, well considered, well spoken with, deeply pondered with the Lord. Do I feel like I'm not doing enough? Do I feel like I'm not doing enough? Do I feel like I need more of a purpose? Do I consider what I'm doing of little to no value to the world? Does what I'm doing bring purpose and value to not just my life, but the world around me? What are these responses in your heart? And this conversation with this person kind of sparked this. The Lord just spoke to me. They said, I'm living a humble life before God, working a 9 to 5, providing for my wife and my kid. And they said, I'm serving God with honestly, now that I'm saying this to you, they didn't even say this, but this is what I understood. They didn't say it out loud. Or maybe they did. I can't remember. What I'm saying is, in my heart, and what the Holy Spirit spoke to me, was that you have this one life, and there's so many things you can do with it. Every single day, you have an opportunity to do 1,000,010 things. And on a grand scale and on a smaller scale, you can decide what you want to do with your life. And hopefully you're asking the Lord with where you're at. And hopefully you're in God's will for your life at this moment on your journey. You know, and this is something that popped up in my mind as I'm talking to you. Here, we always say, what I'm called to. Like if I were to rewind that statement and say to you what most people say. Oh, I'm in this stage of my life, but it's not what I'm called to. See that statement? Which implies that what you're doing now is of lesser value than what you are called to do. And that there is of greater value at some point in your life, but not now. What you're doing right now is of little to no value, or of much less value than what you have planned and what the Lord has told you in a prophecy once or twice or 5 times that you will do this, which is probably true. It could be true. What he has told you will do. And I'm not knocking that at all, because that is of great value. But that is of great value, along with what you are doing right now, is of deep, deep value and grandeur to the Lord, as what you feel the Lord has called you to someday. And I think when my friend said that they were living a humble life, providing for their wife and their kid, and working this 9 to 5, that they said it, but the way that they said it wasn't what you would think. That it was of less value. He said it as if it was of great value and of great importance. That yes, he is, air quotes, just being a husband, providing for his wife and his family, helping his mom be a stay-at-home mom, helping his wife be a stay-at-home mom. I mean, that is of all value to the Lord. And it is of great grandeur to the Lord. So yes, this person is also called to disciple many people and to bring many souls to the Lord, and has a pastor's heart. But as of right now, he is living of deep value. He is living a life of purpose and of intentionality in the Lord's heart and mind. And I wanted to speak this over you, that what you are doing right now, yes, you have grandeur plans of owning this home and of owning this place and of being this pastor of this church, and preaching and winning this many souls, and of owning this business, and of being debt-free. You have all these goals, and you will reach them if you are consistent and work hard, and with the grace of God. But if you are consistent and you don't give up, okay, I just had to add that because I don't know where that came in, but don't give up. Do not give up. Oh, I just feel the Lord saying, do not give up. I feel like there's someone that's listening that wants to give up. Don't give up. This is your word from the Lord to not give up. With whatever it is you're feeling like you should give up. Don't give up. And what you're doing right now is of grave value to the Lord. And yes, it is mundane. It can be mundane, but you can also find joy in each and every day. You can find the Lord in each and every day. And the Lord just wants to be with you, man. And I'm preaching to the choir. And I'm preaching to myself. But he just wants to be with us. And I think I bored my son to sleep. I think he's sleeping. Anyways, all that to say, what you're doing right now is of deep value to the Lord. Yes, you can be hopeful for the future. Be hopeful for what you feel the Lord has called you to. But also know that what you're doing right now is of intense value to the Lord. And you can be sure that each and every moment of your day is considered by the Lord. It's valued by the Lord. And your right now is of deep importance. Not just for your when, but it's of deep importance for your right now, in the sense of that your life in the now is just as important as anyone else's life that's doing something of grandeur, what's considered grandeur in the church or grandeur in the world. Because each and every day can be a gift to your neighbor. Just keeping people company, just keeping a person company is of deep value to the Lord. A lonely neighbor, that's love and of deep value. Buying your friend a coffee or a meal, deep value to the Lord. You're demonstrating love. So, with that, I bid you adieu. You can live your very important life now, and all the glory is to God. You can follow Goatee GD on Twitter and leave a review if you'd like. That would be great. And participate in podcasts if you tweet me at GoTGD on Twitter. That would be awesome. Or if you want to let me know like a different topic you want me to talk about. But in the meantime, I will record another podcast for you for Wednesday of this upcoming week. Love you so much and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.